This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
And we continue NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile Poet Laureate, Rich Michelson. Rich, you have another very special, fabulous poet with us today. Please, the honor and pleasure of the introduction is yours.
This is, as I said, an incredible couple of days for poetry in the Valley. And tonight, so you don't even have to put this on your calendar because you'll remember it's tonight. Victoria Chang will be reading at the Poetry Center at Smith College, a wonderful series that Matt Donovan set up for us all in this time of the coronavirus, where we can just go to our computer and we can listen to some of the best poets this country has. Victoria was nice enough to get up early today. She's on the West Coast, so it's 3 hours earlier for her. And she has a new book out called OBIT. We'll talk about that in the future, in a moment. Victoria has written 5 books of poems, a children's book, Mommy, with my friend Marla Frazzi. Another children's book, Love, Love. She has an MBA from Stanford Business School. Today we had a poet, Martina Spada, who was a lawyer, and now we have an MBA. So there are poets doing everything in this country.
That's really interesting. I know about a lot of recovering lawyers, but I don't know that many recovering MBAs.
Well, we'll get a chance to ask about that. This new book is about Victoria's mother's death, her father's dementia. It's very moving. It's just an incredible book. It's about language. It's about the words we used for grief. Being as my next book is about my father's death and my mother's dementia, I was just especially pleased to pick this up and see what Victoria, welcome.
Hi.
We're thrilled to have you. We're thrilled that you're reading at Smith College. We're only sorry that we can't have you here in person. So tell me a little bit about, well, let me say that this book is very unusual. If you don't have it in front of you, most of the poems are done in an obituary form. When we're talking about death, we're usually thinking about elegy, a grand language. Here, there's almost a journalistic feel to the poems, and what people can do with language within that is amazing. So I'd like to start out by having you read a poem and then talk a little bit about the form and how you came to it. I don't know if there's something you want to read specifically. I love page 10, obituary, if you don't mind.
Sure. Language. Language died brilliant and beautiful on August 1st, 2009 at 2:46 p.m. Lover of raising his hand, Language lived a full life of questioning. His favorite was twisting what others said. His favorite was to write the world in black and white and then watch people try and read the words in color. Letters used to skim my father's brain before they let go. Now his words are blind, are pleated, are the dispatcher, the dispatches, and the receiver. When my mother was dying, I made everyone stand around the bed for what would be the last group photo. Some of us even smiled, because dying lasts forever until it stops. Someone said, "Take a few." Someone said, "Say cheese." Someone said, "Thank you." Language fails us in the way that breaking an arm means an arm's bone can break, but the arm itself can't break off unless sawed or cut. My mother couldn't speak, but her eyes were the only ones that were wide open.
That is Victoria Chang reading from her new book, OBIT. She will be reading this evening at the Smith College Poetry Center. It's actually the hotel. It's got a brand new name, and I should have written that down. I apologize. But please go to the Smith College Poetry Center page. You'll see a link to sign in there. For those who can't see, so these poems visually on the page look like an obituary in a newspaper, or also very much like a gravestone. The lines are, are what you're able to fit within that form is amazing to me. So, how did that form come about? Did you want to kind of mimic an obituary form? Did that come later?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure actually. I mean, it's hard to remember when something sort of strikes you in terms of writing, and as artists and writers, things are striking us all the time, and I'm always trying new things. But I do remember sitting in a car and listening to NPR, and they were talking about the documentary film that someone had made called OBIT, and that, I think that word did something in my brain or in my body. And then I went home and wrote all 70, I think 75, I've never really counted, of these obituaries in 2 weeks. And so I'm not sure what happened. I just, I don't actually remember it that well, but I do remember that listening to that like them talking about that documentary and thinking that word was kind of interesting.
So at what point did you realize you were just going to keep going, or just kept going?
I just kept up going. Yeah, I try not to be super conscious when I'm writing, and or actually conscious at all, because I just sort of go with wherever it takes me, if that makes sense. And so I try not to, if I'm in that kind of mode, I don't ask questions, and I don't stop myself until I stop, if that makes sense. So I just sort of let it go until it goes, and stops when it stops.
Right. So this book really circles around the language of grief, how we deal with it in our day-to-day life. You're talking about a parent's death, but along with that, everything else that dies when a parent dies, which is, items in the house, the way you think about things, part of yourself also. And there are a number of poems in this book about Victoria Chang's death, or a piece of you that dies along with your mother. And I'm wondering if we can read one of those as well.
Sure. I think the one you wanted me to read is on this page 7, right? Yeah.
Sure.
Victoria Chang died unknowingly on June 24th, 2009 on the I-405 freeway. Born in the Motor City, it is fitting she died on a freeway. When her mother called about her father's heart attack, she was living an indented life, a swallow that didn't dip. This was not her first death. All her deaths had creases, except this one. It didn't matter that her mother was wrong, it was a stroke, but that Victoria Chang had to ask whether she should drive to see the frontal lobe. When her mother said yes, Victoria Chang had the feeling of not wanting to. Someone heard that feeling, because he did not die, but all of his words did. At the hospital, Victoria Chang cried when her father no longer made sense. This was before she understood the cruelty of his disease. It would be the last time she cried in front of it. She switched places with her shadow, because suffering changes shape and happens secretly.
That is Victoria Chang reading from her book, OBIT. This book was nominated for the 2020 National Book Award, named a Best Book of the Year by NPR, Time Magazine publishes weekly, and me too. I think this is an incredible book. It was just a whole new way of looking at poetry for me, of looking at language. I think what you did in this, encapsulating this book, things that I just hadn't thought of before. There's a poem about obituary writer who dies before the obit comes out. I actually had a friend who wrote obituaries for the New York Times. And could you imagine if obituaries were written with the care and love and truth that is in this book? So please, everyone, tune in tonight. Victoria Chang reading at Smith College at 7:30. That's Eastern time. You're going to have a long day, Victoria, because we got you up so early. I thank you for joining us on NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, and I look forward to listening to you tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Oh.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much, Rich Michelson. We thank Martina Spada and Paul Moriarty again. Thank you all so very much. Victoria, those are amazing poems. I can't wait to hear you read tonight. Thank you so much for coming up and coming on our show so early, making the time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
There in the tall grass where a couple had been